taking it all. Diving deep into topics, we'll rise or we'll fall. Every episode's a journey, a ride through the maze. Join us on this path, let's ignite the blaze. So grab your headphones tight, let's go for a ride. With every spin and twist, we'll couldn't run and hide. The Prime Directive, where the laughter's alive. Society's reflections, let's help each other thrive. Politics and culture, oh what a blend. Join on the journey and let's set the trend.
Okay, so why don't we get started here? We're back again for another episode of the Prime Directive.
It's okay, you can admit it, you missed us.
The directive that is prime and like prime rib.
It's been 2
cut
weeks.
into it.
It's been a few.
Delicious. You'll notice that we do have a special guest with us this week. We wanted to see how this would work out by adding the real brains.
This is a pilot guest episode just to see how it goes for others.
Well, we wanted
follow.
to increase the level of thinking versus just the absurdity of us. So, anyway, we are the Prime Directive. This is our podcast with the bold mission to explore this strange new world by discussing a range of topics and interests to us. We ask that you join us to listen with an open mind. Look with your human eyes to thoughtfully interact and share your thoughts with us. We promise to get into the comments section. It's been a crazy couple weeks for all of us. So
Agreed.
We'll try to get to as many comments and thoughts as we can get to here. We are seeking life forms willing to engage in respectful discourse, and we want to put the civil in civilization. Okay, so this week's topic, the theme for us this week, we were sitting around and chatting about what would be the most timely thing to discuss given everything that is going on. You know, the shit show that is happening in politics, what I think everybody is experiencing in their personal lives, in their societal lives. Evil.
Oh, that's it? This is where we're starting?
This is where we're starting.
Fantastic. I thought we were going to talk about like what I had for breakfast this morning, which was cereal, and I thought that would be like an easy segue to get to evil.
Cereal can be evil.
Cereal can be evil.
Definitely.
Right?
You ever tasted Captain
Sugar-laden
Crunch when
cereal.
it's been left out for a while? Captain Crunch, pretty evil.
I don't know that this topic's timely. I think it's just ever present. It's ever lurking in the background.
Yeah, I could see
Right.
that 100%.
Yeah, and I mean, I've been doing a lot of just even research this week and the week before too, just on some of the ideas about evil, some of the definitions of evil, some of the experiences of evil. There's theological, considerations with regard to evil. And maybe we could even just start right there. Like, I don't know, you in the comments section too. Maybe add your comment voice to this kind of discussion we're going to have. And at one point we will have like call-ins too. We would like to hear people's ideas as well. But where do we start with a definition of this 4-letter word?
Right?
How do we define it? What is this thing? You can feel it. You can sense it.
Yes, you can.
I think the consensus amongst us, and I think with most of humanity, is that this is a thing that exists.
You know it when you see it.
But it's hard to define. You know it's there. You know that it's ever present. You know that we're going through it. And boy, if you've felt it before, as most people have, I think it's unmistakable. Yet, what is it?
I feel like there are many different levels of what it really is. I mean, you can sure use that blanket word and to describe evil in many different aspects of our existence. But I think there are various levels of how evil something is. And I feel like oftentimes when we're talking about evil, especially, from a societal norms perspective, we are referencing something truly heinous or something that is universally evil, where the vast majority or even more than that of the general public will look at that and go, wow, that's really bad. Mm-hmm. So that's, I don't know. It's interesting because I'm certain we can all bring up specific examples to outline some of these, evils, both historical, current things where you're like somebody being without a place to live.
Yeah.
in its basic format, in its basic form, is evil. It's evil to think about the prospect that there exists someone that is completely in someone's blind spot, in the societal blind spot, to not have a place where they can feel secure. How do you expect somebody to be at their very best if they don't even have the basics met? And not to go into the hierarchy of needs or anything like that, but it is that.
Yeah.
So is it evil? It's a legitimate question, right? Is that evil?
It is a legitimate
Well, that
question.
is the evil that when I was talking about things that were of interest or things that fascinated me was this idea of the banality of evil. And there's a philosopher that I really find interesting, and her name's hannaharendt. And she wrote on the banality of evil, and evil basically as thoughtlessness and just being almost commonplace in the evil, in that it's embedded within like an administration.
I don't think a lot of people are familiar with this lady's journey. Teach the listeners out there.
A philosopher, in the 20th century, female philosopher, very influenced by Immanuel Kant, and also
Heidegger, right?
Yeah.
Heidegger was a contemporary.
Yes, and got her Ph.D. in like 1929 as a female, and really, really interested in the dynamics of power, and the dynamics of evil, the dynamics of wealth and oppression, and growing up in Nazi Germany as a Jew, and eventually fled and was in America in 1950, came to America, but just really looking at totalitarianism and evil regimes, but looking specifically writing after the fall of the Nazi regime, looking at how ordinary some of the evildoers were, and how that kind of evil had been so commonplace, like this, just part of everyday ordinary tasks. People were carrying out heinous acts as part of their jobs, and in order to please the boss, just seeing it as something that was just an ordinary routine task. And so that evil as thoughtlessness, and evil as commonplace, and part of bureaucracy in the system, and they were able to take the morality out of it. It was just this absolutely thoughtless task that they compartmentalized. And so that to me is almost, when I think about when we do place evil in a modern day context, when we're looking at things going on today, are people just starting to remove themselves and compartmentalize in order to commit these evils because they're able to consider it part of their loyalty to a group, and so, therefore they're just without thought. That
is incredible. So for the people that don't know, we've added my wife here to the discussion today. Tell people who are going to be watching this episode, what's your background? Because this is going to inform, I think, a lot of viewers, where are you getting your ideas, so what's your background?
My background's teaching different classes in leadership, ethical leadership, gender and leadership, organizational leadership for going on 26 years. And so just that those areas are of interest to me. And so just find it fascinating. In the ethical leadership class I teach a lot of the concepts of, bad leadership, some of Barbara Kellerman's research out of Harvard, looking at the types of leadership, and looking at different faces of evil, evil. Zimbardo's research out of Stanford, and the Stanford Prison Experiment. And also Stanley Milgram's experiments on obedience.
See, we can talk about all these.
And, the way that people are obedient when they feel that they're obeying an authority figure. They absolve themselves of responsibility for evil acts. I find that fascinating. So just thinking about these things and talking about them today was just kind of something I think would be interesting. So that's my background.
Right.
and where I'm coming from, and some of the things that when I think of leadership, I find interesting in terms of leadership failure.
And
And
that's
I
where you
think we're
teach at the
seeing
university.
leadership
Yeah.
failure.
Yeah, exactly. And
Lots of it.
And the other important thing that we also need to discuss is we have, this privilege to bring you along so you can elevate the conversation, because otherwise it was just gonna
a couple of guys farting on a couch and stuff.
It's just, I mean, Eric, that is simply going to be inevitable. We
No,
have to
I watch
express
these
some-
guys
Oh my
week
God.
to week, and I just absolutely love the magic the two of them have.
Magic.
So
That's
not so.
magic is one descriptor.
Yeah,
They call me the wizard. Eric,
Oh,
don't. No, we're not gonna go there.
No, I know.
We're not
I
gonna go there.
won't. No, Liesl has been the one. You've truly been the one that opened my eyes to just, I would say, over the years, trying to understand leadership in a way that is academic, scientific, not just dogmatically based. In the religious world, with my background and stuff, and coming through like the Methodist
the
Church,
philosophy.
and a lot of great philosophers, they want to get away from the dogmatic, right? They want to try to get to a place where you can understand what something is, give it a clearer or a more clearer definition, and give yourself a chance to, at least if you can understand something, there's a hope that maybe you can control it, you can teach others about it, and then the world isn't suffering from such a concept. In the case of what we're going through right now, I think we're seeing evil as banality. I think in American society right now, underneath the Trump, what do we want to call it? Cult? Maybe that's too harsh. The Trump mindset. I don't know what the right word is. This people have just detached their brains. They are not critically thinking about what could happen. They're not thinking about like step A leading to step B, which then leads to step C.
Well, it's thoughtless obedience.
Obedience. Yeah. And it isn't, it's just truly bizarre. It almost isn't even, it's not rational. Reason is not entering the equation in this stuff.
And what is presently happening? What is one of the governmental agencies that is actively being undermined? The Department of Education.
Of course.
If we're gonna reference the importance of thought and being thoughtful
Led by
and
a
be thinking.
former wrestling.
It's just it's remarkable that it's almost as if, and I don't know if you've heard this recently, but the objective is to undermine, to say, see, it doesn't function.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, I'm going to do something
strike the credibility of
to strike
the
the credibility
institution.
to ultimately break something and say it doesn't work anymore. And furthermore, I mean, we can also have a separate discussion on this in its entirety, but when it comes to the strategy being employed, which is very effective, because all I need to do is basically be a magician, where all I have to do is I'm going to divert your attention to these things over here while I go and take care of something else that I don't want you to pay attention to.
Yeah.
So that's what I've noticed. We discussed birthright citizenship, etc., and how much fervor there was in that regard. And I don't know if you've heard this recently in the news, but there has been talk about that. It's a distraction strategy. Hey, look over here.
Sure.
And that's kind of like what magicians do.
And it's a blitzkrieg of absurdity and confusion and misinformation and misdirection and just absurd after absurd after absurd, because then you're not focused on like
everything
on where
else.
the money is going, right? The money. That's if you're paying attention to what Elon Musk is doing and how he's raiding the treasuries and trying to get to people's accounts and eventually probably trying to figure out a way to steal everybody's Social Security
and
checks.
Meals on Wheels.
Right.
Apparently, he was going to halt Meals on Wheels for the elderly to get food.
Sure
That's,
was.
just
that's a priority.
Yeah.
To dismantle
we can't have
Meals on Wheels.
Yeah. we can't have money
in the
wasted
future,
on something
in the
like
future,
that.
when history books are written, they'll look at this time, and they'll look at a guy like an Elon Musk as like a technocratic version of like an Erwin Rommel. Like he's like this opening salvo of the generals of totalitarianism.
But just imagine if you were working in one of these agencies and you had a 19-year-old kid come in and to be your boss the next day, just barely out of high school. You've been an expert in your field, you're credentialed, you know your way around the place. And a 19-year-old kid comes in and you're told that's going to be, you're reporting to this kid.
Sure. And then it's
Just
designed,
imagine
the banality.
Imagine what that would feel like.
And so to use Arendt's, right? Hannah Arendt's. I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing that. To use her analysis,
I think so.
right?
I think hopefully I'm pronouncing it right.
She would say things
Sounds right.
like, it's in the design.
You speak German, Admar.
Yeah.
That sounds right.
So it sounds like it's in the design to be absurd, to be technocratically, bureaucratically dehumanizing, to distance yourself from the harm that you're creating, right? And so
To create a sense of apathy.
Yeah.
To create a sense of apathy, because if I'm apathetic, I don't even need to care about anything anymore, because if I'm apathetic, I certainly don't. So if I'm apathetic, I don't really care what happens. It's
you just watch.
whatever, I'm just attached
Then you
to
just
that
watch
point.
the Super Bowl.
Exactly.
No,
You watch a
you're able
meaningless
to
game that doesn't mean anything.
Absolve yourself
and
of
you're not gonna-
responsibility. You're just doing what you're told. I mean, that was what. I mean, obviously, it didn't work at the Nuremberg Trials. That wasn't a valid excuse. But I mean,
You mean
that's
for Eichmann, right?
right
Adolf
for
Eichmann.
any of them. But I mean, that's certainly in administrative and bureaucratic types of evil, that's the excuse. And with those Milgram experiments, that's. Yeah. They just perceived an authority figure telling them to administer shocks, even though this was an experiment and they weren't really administering shocks. They just kept increasing the dose because they were told to do so to who they thought was a participant on the other side of a screen.
Yeah.
And when they were told, by someone with a clipboard, keep increasing the dose, even though they heard somebody screaming on the other side. They had an authority figure absolving them of responsibility for harming another human being, so they kept doing it.
The Milgram
and
experiment.
So the Milgram experience. So this is, how far ordinary people who weren't, had nothing against that person and weren't socialized to do evil. They hadn't been conditioned, socialized, co-opted, conditioned within an organizational structure to perform evil. Just off the streets, were more than willing to do it when an authority figure asked them to. So this obedience is, we're so conditioned to be obedient.
See, so maybe a condition for evil as a starting definition is the intent to harm. If you don't, maybe you don't even actually harm somebody. It's just the intent to harm.
I don't think that you need to even have that. I think it's this intent to please, like authority. I mean, it seems that, again, it's just this banality. You can be completely normal, but when you're put into this evil system, like Zimbardo found with the Stanford Prison Experiment, the conditions
are
part of it.
Would ultimately give you credence, and I think it's also a question of authority.
Yeah.
Because if there's one thing that I always thought was interesting is that during the Stanford Prison Experiment, the elevated sense of self to create the other.
Yeah.
Because it is me.
The in-group and the out-group.
Correct.
Right.
And once you have that, that's what's that dehumanizes. And if I can dehumanize it, a group, I can create that sense of apathy.
Yeah.
Where
Trump's language about the Democrats as being less than all the time.
Or any other group. Democrats just happen to be the opposition party. But
immigrants.
It could be any immigrants. It could be anybody. They're eating the cats. They're eating the dogs. Yeah, I know. Now, what's so interesting to me about the Milgram experiment, when I was researching that a little bit to talk about for today, is they continued to do those experiments. So everybody knows this Milgram experiment with the shocks and people are screaming, or most people who've gone through college. This is one of the opening things that you go through in a psychology or sociology class. is you're taught the Milgram stuff. But I didn't know they continue those experiments because they wanted to figure out, like, what were the conditions when you change some of the variables and whatnot to change these outcomes. So they were able to show that you could change the outcomes. And this is what the viewers out there need to understand, right? Is when it was just a person and there was just a person with a lab coat telling them, increase the shocks, wrong, increase the shock, wrong, increase the shock. Over 60%, I think it was 65% of people or more would just keep increasing the shock, even to lethal levels, right? They would just even, and at one point, the actor on the other side of the screen stopped screaming like they were dead.
Right.
They were playing along like they were dead, and the people were still like, 450 volt.
Yeah.
However, in the second set and third and fourth set of experiments, they introduced variables like two scientists coming in the room who suddenly start arguing with each other. Hey, what are you doing? Don't shock that person. Wait,
Someone willing to question
this
authority.
is getting dangerous. Don't do this. No. Then the likelihood to shock dropped down into like the 10-15% range.
Remarkable.
And so what the lesson is, if you confront evil or you confront what you believe to be an immoral or unethical action, you're giving then the people out there permission to begin to question. And as soon as you've opened the door down the path of at least thinking and critical reasoning,
You're introducing a new norm.
You're introducing a new norm. Yeah, that's correct.
As we close the chapter, lend us your ear. The Prime Directive's calling, so let's persevere. The Prime Directive, where the laughter's alive. Society's reflections, let's help each other thrive.